Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Brandon Laws. I'm the Director of Marketing at Xenium HR, and I'll be your moderator for today. Today's webinar is Engaging the Future, Why Investing in Emerging Leaders Matters. And we are very excited to have Suzi Alligood. She is Xenium's VP of People Development and Culture. So before I turn it over to Suzi, I'm going to go over a couple housekeeping items. So first off, this presentation is about 25-30 minutes. So Suzi will talk for about that much time, and then we'll wrap up by doing 15 minutes of Q&A. So we'll answer your questions. You'll notice on the GoToWebinar panel, usually on the right-hand side, it's kind of docked to the screen. You can chat with us. You can answer or ask any questions. I'll be monitoring those throughout the presentation, so feel free to ask any questions from now up until the Q&A session, and I'll be monitoring those. A lot of people ask if the slides and recording will be available to attendees, and absolutely yes. We'll usually send those out about a day later, so usually the slides and the recording will be in one link, and you'll be able to access both, and you are so welcome to send those to people in your organization or anybody else. We're glad to have that shared. And then if you want to get alerts about our events, webinars, podcasts, and other content that we have, go to our website, scroll about halfway down, and then enter your email address to subscribe to our updates. All right, so I would like to introduce Suzi Alligood. She is the VP of People Development and Culture at Xenium. She has over 15 years of experience and partnering with various employers to design and implement end-to-end HR systems that improve employee engagement. Suzi also designs and delivers professional development workshops at Xenium. I definitely encourage you to come watch her in action. She's an amazing presenter and builds some amazing content. She also contributes regularly in various ways to a lot of our marketing contents. She's been on our podcast. She writes a lot for us. So it's likely that you've seen or heard her work somewhere. She's also our internal leader of the culture committee at Xenium. We call it Excite. And she's done wonders to our culture. And she's just an amazing person. And we're so glad to have her. So I'm going to turn it over to Suzi. It's all yours.
Thank you, Brandon. Glad to be here. So in this session, I want to hit on three key areas, and I will be providing some examples and hopefully some key takeaways for the audience, as well as provide the opportunity at the end for some Q&A. So in this webinar, I will answer the following questions. One, why is this topic of investing in leaders relevant? Two, what are the top skill sets required for emerging leaders? And three, how can employers implement professional development to engage and retain their high potential employees? So with regard to the first question, why is this topic of investing in leaders relevant? Well, over the past few years, leadership development has continued to be at the top of the list of talent trends. It has become a priority for employers because the impact that managers have on organizational culture and performance is so important. And we'll talk about why it's even becoming more increasingly important given the changes in our workforce and the job market. With regard to skill sets required for current and even emerging leaders, based on published data as well as what we learned from working with our clients and their employees, there are some clear leadership skill gaps. And today we're going to focus on two competency areas. Ideally, employers are developing a plan to equip their high-performing employees before they insert them into a position of supervising others. But we know with competing business demands for many small to medium-sized businesses, this hasn't been a traditional practice. And then how can employers approach professional development, not only to equip employees for that next step in their career, but also to engage and retain their talent? Many employers are discovering that employees will not stick around if they do not see a career path, have an opportunity to learn new skills, or advance within the organization. So having some sort of professional development program where employees can be exposed to new experiences, learn new skills, it increases your chances of engaging and retaining those high achievers, even if you don't have a promotion readily available. So we'll look at some examples of how you can strategically identify and develop employees. So let's talk about what's going on out there in the world and why leadership development is so important. You know, this conversation is relevant because of two key factors. There's a growing demand for leadership skills, and because our economy is improving and unemployment is low, which is a good thing, there is this increased competition for talent. So to be competitive, employers need to have some type of strategies for both recruitment of new talent, so attracting talent, but also developing existing talent for those leadership roles. The American workforce has never been more diverse, and we've got multiple generations spanning from baby boomers to Gen Xers and beyond. And in recent years, millennials, which are the adults ages 19 to 35, they've driven the biggest transformation in workplace dynamics. And many of you probably are aware that in 2015, millennials became the largest generation in our workforce, as reported by the Pew Research Center. So the two youngest generations, which are the millennials and the Gen Z, as they're referred to, those are folks born after 2000, together they'll compose nearly 70% of global employees within the next few years. And interestingly, part of the growth of the younger workers is due to immigration. So in the past 5 years, over half of newly arrived immigrant workers have been millennials. So what does this mean for employers? Employers need to leverage younger workers for leadership as the baby boomer employee numbers decline, and there's not going to be enough Gen X employees to assume those leadership roles. So with millennials moving into leadership positions and even younger generation, Gen Zs, preparing to enter the workforce, employers who are providing training and development will be in a better position to engage and retain talent, especially in this tight labor market. The millennials, younger employees, are highly educated and technologically connected group. They approach the workplace often with the mentality, what's in it for me, right? What are my opportunities? And they're the generation most likely to switch jobs and be on the lookout for new opportunities. They want more out of life and they believe they can get it. Not a bad thing, just optimistic. And in a recent study by Randstad and Morar Consulting, nearly 84% of Gen Z workers said they aspired to be leaders, while 79% of millennials said the same. So there is this desire to become a leader for these younger folks. And what they're really focused on often are advancement, professional and financial, but even more importantly, the desire to have influence and make an impact. Also, according to Gallup, which many of you are probably familiar with their engagement data, 87% of millennials agree that development is important and directly influences their engagement. So these are all great reasons to make sure that we are putting some focus and attention on leadership development programs. So let's talk about some top leadership competencies. The two areas I want to focus on today, and there are more, but two big areas are emotional intelligence and communicating to influence. So one of the biggest challenges for leaders today is managing different personalities while maintaining a strong, productive culture in a diverse environment. It's a tall order. So in addition to needing the basics of supervising others, employers are finding that many of their younger workers are lacking these soft skills required to effectively lead others. And so the term soft skill, in contrast to hard skills, which are more technical in nature, encompasses a wide range of non-technical skills, ranging from self-awareness to people skills to teamwork. And these skills can be more difficult to master and measure than the technical skills, but they are absolutely critical to the success or failure of any individual in the workplace. When employees have significant gaps in their soft skills, there are significant consequences. So the right people aren't hired, employees don't feel supported, misunderstandings bubble up into unproductive conflict. All of these things have a negative impact on productivity, the customer experience, and employee retention. So emotional intelligence and communication skills are critical for this reason and generally must be developed as they're not taught in school. Although, interestingly, there have been some developments in that area. There are some programs that are now, because this need is so large, that are being implemented at even the grade school level. So these areas are where managers continually struggle with and are the focus of leadership coaching. I see it in my day-to-day work. You know, when a client reaches out to us and makes the decision to invest in one-on-one leadership coaching with one of their employees, most of the time, the greatest development opportunities and the goals that we set are around how can I use my emotional intelligence to increase my influence, and how can I develop relationships with stakeholders in my organization in order to deliver results. So as we continue to rely more on technology for communication, and there's more telecommuting, remote workers, these skills are going to become even more important. And business is still going to be about people, and our ability to connect with others is critical to our success. So employers are specifically noting these skills as qualifications in their job postings because they recognize the importance, especially when they've had a deficit in their organization. The good news is that emotional intelligence and influential communication can be developed. And based on my experience, I've noticed that younger employees have an openness and a desire to learn and apply these skills, which is exciting. So let's talk about emotional intelligence. High emotional intelligence has been linked to positive leadership as well as individual and organizational success. So Dr. Travis Bradberry, he's known for authoring the book Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which I recommend. He states that 90% of top performers tested high in emotional intelligence. Now, on the flip side, just 20% of bottom performers rated high in emotional intelligence. There's also other research done by Daniel Goleman that indicates similar impact and results. So what exactly is emotional intelligence? Well, it consists of 4 skills. So self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So let's break that down. Being self-aware, what does that consist of? Well, that means that I possess an accurate assessment of my strengths and weaknesses, including blind spots that may get me into trouble. I'm also in tune with my thoughts and emotions and how they impact my behavior. And I'm open to feedback as an opportunity to improve my performance. In other words, I'm open-minded and I strive to be a continuous learner. A common struggle for managers, which impacts their overall effectiveness, is a lack of self-awareness. They have positive intentions, but they may not recognize how their behavior is impacting others. Self-management. That includes the ability to regulate my emotions and my behavior, especially during stressful situations. So think before I act. And we know that there's always stress in the work environment, and a lot of times managers have additional stressors, so this is really important. It also includes accepting full ownership and accountability for my actions. So I'm taking responsibility for my behavior. And I'm demonstrating behavior that's consistent with my intentions. So I'm not saying one thing and then my behavior indicating something incongruent with that. Leaders with good self-control, they can control their emotions versus letting their emotions control them, and they can maintain a resourceful state when stress is high. We see that leaders who lack this control tend to have unpredictable behavior, which easily leads to a lack of confidence and feelings of distrust from their team. Social awareness. So that involves the ability to understand the emotions, needs, and concerns of other people. So the ability to demonstrate empathy. It also means that I can recognize the power and interpersonal dynamics in a group or on my team and how people work together and how to support good collaboration. And then I'm also able to practice and demonstrate good listening skills, because when leaders respond to the needs and feelings of other people, they gain their trust. And lastly, relationship management skills include developing positive working relationships with others, so the ability to build bonds and connections with others. Also includes fostering a culture of teamwork and collaboration, so getting people working well together, and inspiring and influencing others to adopt and work through change and conflict, which are really critical skills. So all of these skills under emotional intelligence, they combined, they make a difference in our ability to develop positive and productive work relationships, whether it be with our direct reports, peers, or managers. And when we leverage our strengths, people generally move towards us and for us, therefore increasing our ability to influence. So the next competency area that's crucial is the ability to influence through communication. So communication is a very broad topic, but here are three key areas with regard to communication based on the largest gaps that we're seeing. So younger employees, as I mentioned earlier, are really interested in having influence and making an impact, not only in the workplace, but in the world. So in addition to emotional intelligence, there are some key communication skills. So under this category, credibility and impact is important. So when someone demonstrates credibility and impact, they create a credible first impression. They can command attention and respect, and it's not through authority, right? It's through credibility. They demonstrate confidence. They're looked to for direction in a crisis. They can face adversity head on. They're energized by tough challenges. And beyond that, they demonstrate integrity and achieve consistent results. So that is how one gains credibility and impact in their role as a leader. Next is professional communication. And I actually receive a fair amount of requests from clients about, hey, can you do a communication training? And I always say, well, what specifically are you hoping to achieve, right? Because again, that can cover a lot of things. But one thing that comes up with is just professional communication in the workplace. And a lot of younger employees haven't had any prior business or professional experience before coming to work for you, and they may not understand what that actually looks like. So how professional communication is demonstrated in this particular competency is one's ability to clearly convey information and ideas to individuals or even groups in a manner that engages the audience and helps them understand and retain the message. It also includes being able to organize and structure communication to be professional, appropriate, positive, and succinct, okay? And a leader needs to be able to communicate important, relevant messages to the organization through the right channels and measured against well-considered organizational and communication-specific goals. The last skill set in this competency is coaching and feedback. So if you are in the role of supervising others, your goal is to help people do their best work and get the best out of people. So coaching and feedback skills are crucial. Being able to coach and provide effective feedback involves guiding others in goal setting, identifying resources and measuring success, providing encouragement and ongoing feedback to help others strengthen specific knowledge and skill areas needed to accomplish a goal. And it needs to be timely. And there needs to be some accountability and constructive feedback, especially when someone is not meeting expectations. And interestingly, this skill set is becoming critical for all roles, not even just leadership, because there's more reliance on self-directed teams and the need for collaboration is growing in general. So how do we approach development, and who do we invest our development dollars in. So obviously you want to get the biggest return on your investment. So it does deserve some thought and strategy. At a high level, you want to consider the employees who demonstrate the following. Number one, a strong commitment to your organization. So do they fit your culture and your values? Have they demonstrated that they care about your organization and your customers? Do they actively participate? Are they taking initiative that indicates to you that, you know, they don't have one foot out the door, right? Next is aptitude. So, you know, people are always growing and developing their skills, but have you been able to recognize the potential in someone in terms of their ability to take risks, accept challenges, and achieve some success with those? And then lastly, someone who expresses a passion for coaching and developing and supporting others. And this one is probably the one that gets the most overlooked or not vetted, because we tend to look at our top performers and the people who are successful as individual contributors, and we say, okay, we've got this need for a manager or leader, let's pop this person in, and they should be excited and thrilled because this is a career advancement opportunity. And there's not a lot of thought or conversation with that person about what that means and how their role would change, and if this is something that's really aligned with their passions and interests. And if you have someone who really does have more passion for the technical side of the business or being a subject matter expert, you can end up seeing a decline in that person's performance or their success if they're put into a people leadership role. And that's not something that they aspire to do. So, you know, many high-performing employees, like I said, get promoted, and you have the risk of losing a solid technical independent contributor. So just because they can do the job, the leadership role, doesn't mean that they should. So warrants some vetting and conversation there. So this particular tool, if you haven't seen it before, this is referred to as a 9-box grid. So the 9-box grid is commonly used in succession planning as a method of evaluating an organization's talent pool and identifying potential leaders. So if I'm, you know, going to be strategic about, okay, if I want the biggest return on my investment, who am I going to select, right? And what opportunities am I going to give that individual? So in this grid, you'll see that there's 2 axes. So the horizontal axis assesses leadership performance, and the vertical assesses leadership potential. The combination of these axes determines where the leader is placed in the 9-box grid. So individuals in the upper right box, so like quadrant 1, will then be identified as high potential candidates in your succession or development plan. So those are the folks, especially top right, that you want to make sure that you're having conversations regularly with them about what are their aspirations, what are they, you know, how do they feel that they can be fully utilized and best contribute to our organization. And then you want to look at, okay, how can I match that up with our business needs and put together a plan for them. So generally, this type of assessment is performed by managers at least annually. For larger teams or more dynamic changing teams, it needs to be more frequent, but it's generally part of a talent planning process, and it requires some time and review and calibration of the results by management to make sure that it's as objective as possible. So there are different strategies that then warrant different specific development plans given the employee's placement on the grid. And as we discussed, your highest priority, in other words, biggest bang for your buck, are the employees who fall into that top right corner, likely your future leaders. So once we've identified who those high potential or future leaders are, here are some examples of some strategies. So first, I recommend starting with a customized career development plan to ensure you're creating SMART goals that are focused on maximizing the strengths and growing the skills of that specific individual. So as I said, you want to have a clear understanding of the employee's aspirations to make sure that you're aligned there. Once you have a development plan, then there are different activities that you can assign or provide to that individual to help increase their knowledge, skills, and abilities. So here are some examples. One would be to provide them with shadowing opportunities where they can unhook from their present role and walk in another role that they may hold in the future. Gives them a little more visibility and understanding. Next, you could pair them with a mentor in a senior leadership role that can guide them along the path and help you in watching for any signs of dissatisfaction or threat to retention. Another option would be to seek out opportunities for them to serve as a role model to others by asking them to mentor and coach other future stars, folks that are less senior and have potential as well. You may consider providing these high potential employees with external coaching that can help them enhance their potential and expand their skill set further. And you may encourage participation in leadership roles even outside of your organization. So on committees or association groups where they can learn about leadership from an external and public perspective. The last thing I want to share is an example of how you can structure and define development opportunities by competency. So we talked about some of those key leader competencies. Ideally, this is customized for your organization and what's important for you in reaching your organizational objectives. But having something like this serves as a reference or tool for employees seeking to expand their skills and experience when preparing for that next step or that leadership role. So it limits the need for research by the manager or the employee of what training development options are out there, because we know that if that is a requirement, often it doesn't get done. And when managers, employees have some type of roadmap to follow, they're more likely to utilize it and take some action. So the intent is that there would be some identified competencies within the individual's development plan, and then they would have this roadmap to say, okay, what are some activities that I can participate in that are going to help me develop my competency in this area. So you can see here on the left side, there are competency descriptions. We have emotional intelligence and coaching and feedback as examples. And then the activities, development activities are broken down by type. There's theory, social, and experiential. And they're weighted based on how people or adults learn. So theory would be more of self-study, reading books, watching media, and social would be engaging with others in a collaborative way, which generally people retain that learning more. And then the last is experiential, so that hands-on experimenting and testing and refining skills through on-the-job activities. So again, the intention is to customize competencies and development activities to fit your organizational needs as you look at, okay, when we look at what we need from leaders in this organization and what is important, what are those competencies and how can we create a roadmap with options to help people start developing those skills before they're actually promoted into that role. So we've discussed why investing in future leaders is important. You know, it expands your organizational capabilities and contributes to business growth. And we know that we need to leverage the growing population of younger workers to meet these objectives. Smaller employers can experience big impact in their ability to attract and retain talent by defining critical leader competencies, creating a list of relevant development opportunities, and then proactively identifying and developing employees who are able and committed to leadership roles. The key takeaway, if there's one thing that I think is important to get across, and I see as important in the work that we do, is that doing the work before promoting your high performer is critical. Not only does it help engage those high performers, but it's going to better equip them to be successful in that new role. And it is definitely worth the investment. When I receive calls from clients who want to engage with us for one-on-one coaching, and it's a situation where someone is failing in their leadership role and they're on a final warning, and the hope is that this one-on-one coaching is going to help turn this person around. The likelihood of that happening is pretty low. I've seen limited success. But when we've had clients who leverage us either through training or coaching to start working with an employee who has been identified as a high performer, and we start, giving them knowledge, tools, and information that they can start applying and testing out and refining before they're promoted into the role, that's where we see the biggest success. So that is the end of my content presentation, and I am open now to any questions that the audience might have. I'm going to pass it over to Brandon to help field any questions.
Thank you, Suzi. I appreciate it. Great content, great topic, and this is probably timely heading into the next year, as a lot of leaders are probably planning and trying to work with their high potential employees. So I want to encourage people, if you have any questions, enter them into the chat window. We're already getting a couple in here, so I wanted to just make a couple of reminders before we dive into those. The recording and slides will be available about a day after. We'll send out an email. You'll have a link to download both the slides and the recording. When you close out this webinar, a survey will pop up. We really appreciate that feedback, letting Suzi know how she did, how you like the content overall, and then what you want to hear about in the future. So please fill that out. And then I also put a link to our 2018 workshop calendar in the chat window. So go ahead and access that from there. Suzi's built an amazing calendar for 2018. It seems like Suzi's always adding more and more content every year. I don't know how you have time for this, Suzi, but it's a great curriculum, and I encourage people to come check it out. All right, so we'll dive into the questions. I'm actually going to kick things off with kind of a hypothetical for you, Suzi. So let's say small company, the executive team recognizes that there's a lot of high potential employees, potential leaders who fall into that level of commitment. They have aptitude, and they seem to be very interested in developing others. They fall into that top right corner on that 9-box grid that you showed.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we go about continuing to develop these people and make sure that they have opportunity to develop when there are a very finite amount of leadership positions available in an organization? So lots of opportunity for high potential, but limited positions at the top. What do you do in that situation?
Yeah, that is a challenge, especially for small employers and a lot of nonprofit organizations that we work with. So yeah, how can you help those people grow and stay challenged and feel like they're not being stunted, right? Or they're stuck, right? So my recommendations are really the same, that, you still need to come up with some development plan with goals that align their strengths and interests with the business needs. And you need to be transparent and straightforward with, hey, we're a growing company. Our desire is to keep growing. Here's the business plan. And, if we achieve this, we anticipate that there'll be more opportunities and positions, but to be honest, we don't know exactly how long that's going to take. So let's start preparing for this now and giving them those on-the-job, challenging opportunities to maximize their strengths and keep them challenged, stretch them, put them in positions where they have to take on a new project, or they have to lead something, an initiative, and have the opportunity to fail in a safe, supportive environment and learn from their mistakes. So I think it's being transparent, still having the plan, looking for opportunities that are going to challenge them, whether it be internally or even externally, where they're able to learn new skills that not only help them personally, but also can help add value to the business. And you just have to be honest that, hey, we don't know if or when, but if we if you build it, it will come theory. If we get you prepared, then when that position opens up, you're ready, right?
Yep. So we have several more questions. Susie, before I ask the next question, do you mind toggling to that very last page where the contact information is? I want to make sure that people can access you if they have questions. We might not get to all the questions that are coming in, but so I just wanted to show that real quick. Next question comes from Elizabeth. She asks, are there any specific coaching programs or systems that you use at Xenium? And she provides a couple acronyms: DESK, GROW, etc.
We use both of those techniques. So coaching, I love the GROW model, and I do teach that and utilize that. So GROW is a coaching question technique to help guide people through their own insights and problem solving. And I liken it, to simplify it, I liken it to kind of this continuous improvement type model where one, you're asking questions about, okay, what is it that you hope to achieve? What's your target or desired state or goal? Number two, where are you at right now? What's your current state? And then three, what are some options or some things that you can do or try to close that gap between your current and desired state? And, ask probing questions. What's worked for you in the past? What have you tried? What are some possibilities? Let's just be creative here. And this helps the person generate their own options. And then the last thing is, okay, what's your plan? What are you going to do about it? And what are the action items and timelines? So GROW the acronym stands for goal. I think R is your reality, your current reality, O are options, and W is your way forward, right? So basically desired state, current state, options, and what steps are you going to take? And then the supervisor or coach of that person is really guiding them through that questioning process and then helping them establish some action items and holding them accountable to whatever their plan is. So I do like that one a lot. I use that. DESK is a feedback model to help people craft and articulate meaningful feedback. So we use that in our trainings. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that was well said.
Okay.
All right, this is a long question. I'm going to read it word for word. It's a little bit more complex. It says, I am a millennial, but am from much earlier in the generation than the staff I work with. I find that we are very different in what our expectations are for the workplace and that my staff expect everything to be perfect. For example, or in other words, they don't have to do tasks they don't enjoy, complain about not having enough face-to-face time with the supervisor, but when we come to meetings, they don't have anything to talk about. I suppose I'm wondering if you have some insight or a book about working with folks who lack flexibility or don't think they should be challenged or do things they don't want to do. So recommendations for working with people who lack flexibility.
Wow.
There's a lot of books on that.
Well, I can't honestly. When I don't like to recommend anything that I haven't read and love myself. I can't think of a book offhand on that. I do like the book QBQ that's about personal accountability. And knowing how to ask the right questions to make sure that I'm not being a victim or right or not a contributor or team player. So I think QBQ, Question Behind the Question, is a great book, easy, simple, quick read around personal accountability that ideally everybody read that and
Yeah.
followed it. With regard to the example about, hey, you're saying you want more face time, but then when we have meetings, you're not prepared. I think there's an opportunity on the front end of any relationship or ongoing to share expectations for what we each need. It doesn't matter whether you're team members, a supervisor, or subordinate, but we all have different styles, needs, perspectives. And at the end of the day, we're all just trying to be successful and do a good job. But sometimes it takes just having a conversation up front about, okay, how are we going to work together? So how do you like to be communicated with? How are we going to meet? How frequently? How are these meetings going to go? What can we agree on up front? Just like you would do with a new client, right? When you engage with a new client. So I think for the meeting example specifically, to say, okay, you want more face time, I'm happy to give you that. But what I need in those situations is that you come prepared. And here, let's talk about this agenda. How are we going to, establish the agenda for their conversation, and what are the roles and responsibilities? And, for me to make this time valuable and give you what you need, I need you to come prepared with these things and, these things to discuss. So that we can, right, meet both of our needs and expectations.
It's great.
I did create a handout. It's a tool called How to Best Work with
I
Me.
love that tool, by
And
the way.
yeah, and it's a little questionnaire that, individuals can fill out and then get together and compare notes and establish those agreements and expectations for working together. So that might help bridge that gap where there are differences, whether it be culturally, generationally, personality style. That might be helpful to folks.
Yeah, we'll dig that up and share it in the link. It's a great tool. Okay, so next question, and this is I'm going to summarize this because I think a lot of people could probably resonate this. So if you're not doing any of this, where do you start?
Yeah. Okay.
What's the most important place to start?
Start simple. Yeah. Don't overwhelm yourself. So yeah, if you're totally starting from scratch, um, I would start with the basics, right? So what are the basic things that supervisors need to know, right? So they need to know, okay, how to hire, right? How to interview, how to give feedback. They need to understand the basics of employment law, not be an expert. They need to know enough to know how, when, and how to leverage their resources. Um, and how to set goals. So there's some basics of supervising others. And what I would do is I would seek out, okay, what are some options for education, whether it be local workshops, online courses, and just make a list, right, of what is available and accessible for folks in my organization. And I mean, obviously, this is something that Xenium can help with, but it's something that you can do pretty easily on your own and maybe even tap into your professional network. And then I would say having that is a good first step in being able to offer people in your organization who are communicating that they aspire to be leaders or that you recognize have the potential, or maybe you've already promoted and you haven't trained yet, to get them exposed to at least those trainings and coursework. And, another, I could go crazy on this stuff. Another option could be generating a list of books too and having an internal book club. But I think at minimum, at least identifying what are the basics of supervising and managing others, and at least have some trainings or information available for those folks to access.
Perfect. Okay, we're going to do two quick questions and then we're going to wrap up. A couple questions came in about this, so I'm going to summarize them in kind of my own words. When you're referring to that 9-box grid, when you're reviewing your talent, how should we go about doing that, how often should we do it necessarily? And then how do we document that?
Yeah. So, how often you do it will depend on the size and needs of your organization. So, if your business is rapidly changing and you have um, a huge team, you have more than 10 or 15 direct reports, you may want to look at it even as frequently as quarterly. I would say if you start at least once a year or twice a year, you could have it coincide with an annual goal setting or performance review process as a start. But I would generally, the way that it works is you fill out on your own for your direct reports where you think they would fall. And there's some additional resources online too about how to assign potential ratings and performance ratings. But I would sit down myself and do it for my team. And then you want to get together with your leader or management peers. This is obviously confidential information, but sit down together and have some type of calibration session to make sure that, okay, do I have these people placed properly on the grid? And it's something that I would document for, it's not formal employee documentation. It's your own, supervisor leader documentation that I would keep confidential and as a reference for following up with the individuals to structure a specific development plan.
Okay, last question. How would you go about setting up a mentor relationship, either internally or externally, as you suggested on the development strategy slide, without it being forced?
Yeah. So the best case situation with mentors is kind of this organic, natural pairing, which, it doesn't always happen that way. So you never want to force it. Obviously, you want to match people up that have the availability, interest, and are good fits. Definitely needs to be someone who's more senior and has a broader, different perspective than the person being mentored. I would encourage people to look not just internally, but also externally. I would say if you're in a senior leader role or you're a manager and you have outside contacts through your professional network that would be willing to help out, that you think your employees that you're looking to develop could really benefit from interacting with, that's an option. I would give it some thought, sit down and maybe generate a list of potential options, and then have the person who is going to be participating in mentoring offer their input in terms of who they think might be a fit, and then together come up with some selection. I know internally we've tried to match people up, and there's not always an easy, fit. And it's still better than doing nothing, I would say, right? So the best case scenario would be something that organically happens on its own because two people naturally connect and can learn from each other. But if that's not available, then I would sit down and go through that process of each party kind of brainstorming some options internally and externally, and then agreeing upon one and how that process will work.
Fantastic. Suzi Alligood, thank you for presenting on this topic. We're really glad to have you. For the audience, thank you for attending today. The contact resources are up on the screen if you need to reach out to Suzi. My email address is not on the screen, but it's similarly structured as Suzi's. It's just brandon.laws@zenniemhr.com. Get our free resources, our blog. We have tons of content on there. Podcasts, we have weekly podcasts that you can download on the go. It's audio only, so it's perfect if you're walking your dog, exercising in the morning, or driving in your car. And then webinars as well. Webinars like these, we have them accessible on our website. You see past recordings and register for future ones. So hope to see you at a future workshop, webinar, or just around the web. Thank you again.